Are you the
Our bad influence.
everybody in my vicinity is?
There we go.
Well, actually, I'm gonna. For a good influence.
Oh, that, there you go.
I'm ready whenever you are.
Well, why don't we call this meeting to order? City of North Kansas City proposed annual budget. Eric?
Well, good evening, and thank you for being here tonight for the first of two work sessions on the fiscal year 2020 budget. The format that we followed for the last few years and that I propose to follow again is that I will, in a short bit, present an overview of the budget, and then the departments will go through their budgets. We'll go through department by department, fund by fund. But first, the Parks and Library budgets, the Parks and Recreation Fund and Library Fund budgets are both approved by separate governing boards. And so what we've usually done to avoid them having to come to two meetings and sit through quite a bit of this meeting is take them out of order, allow them to make their presentations of their budgets first, answer any questions you may have, and then they're free to leave after that. So with that then, I would like to go ahead and just make a few remarks about the Parks and Recreation Fund budget, and then Roberta Larson, the president of the board, is here. As you may or may not know, Kelly Vitipka, the Parks and Recreation director, is on medical leave right now, so she's not here tonight. But just a few overview remarks about the Parks and Recreation Fund budget. It is controlled by the Parks and Recreation Board. In this year's budget, the board has approved a budget in which property taxes provide 79% of the revenues for this fund from their separate parks levy. After you take out of consideration several transfers from the gaming fund for capital expenditures that the gaming fund's paying for. In addition to some capital items, the gaming fund pays back the Parks and Recreation Fund for funds that it pays to the general fund for services provided by the general fund. All of the different funds, operating funds, pay the general fund for services that are provided, but in the Parks and Recreation fund is actually paid back at a one-to-one transfer from gaming. This year, that amounts to about $145,000. In fiscal year 2020, the Parks Board has budgeted a deficit of about $80,000, and that will result in a projected fund balance at the end of the fiscal year of about $337,000. And then, in addition, just to be noted, in buildings and grounds, there is a position that is paid for from the general fund in the buildings and grounds budget that is devoted entirely to parks, and which in fact is under the supervision of the Parks and Recreation Director. And then I'd just like to talk briefly about several capital projects that are involved.
May I ask a
Yes,
question,
sir. Yes,
Eric?
sir.
On the Parks and Recreation and Library and other funds, I know the city has a, like a rule that we want to have 25% of operating expenses or such a fund balance. Do the Parks and Rec and Library, do those funds have any rules as far as how much fund balance that they want to carry, a minimum?
Shirley, do you know? Sorry. I haven't really paid it. I think they're both well above that amount, just
Right.
looking at their, but I mean, so I
I see
don't know
this
if they
one
try to follow
going
that rule or
down, so-
not. But we can certainly make them
Continuing to-
aware of it and urge them to try to make sure that they meet that
Have a
target.
healthy fund balance and, you know, because it
Yes.
seems like it decreases and decreases each year, but
But
I know they
compared
have a-
to, yeah. All right.
Actually, they don't have it a written policy or anything, but when they get low, I begin to warn them and they back off. It's not been an issue because they both keep a healthy fund balance.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Just to talk about some capital projects. So, of course, the one that we've talked about not too long ago, which is in process now, is a renovation to Mackin Park Diamond Number 1. In July, the City Council indicated its approval of a project to renovate that diamond at a cost of about $1.1 million. What we're planning and working on right now is an agreement between us and the school district whereby the city would perform the project in its entirety, pay for it in its entirety, and then be repaid 50% of the cost of that by the school district over a 10-year period. So our share, when you take out that repayment, the city's share would be about $562,000, but the initial expenditure will come entirely from the gaming fund. Also shown in the gaming fund is an expenditure for the festival shade structure. You amended the budget earlier this year, the fiscal year 19 budget, to approve that shade structure, but it has not yet been accomplished, and so the Parks and Recreation Director did ask that we transfer the amount you had approved a $60,000 budget for that. A small amount of that has been spent, and the remaining amount, some $56,000, is budgeted to complete the project in fiscal year 20 in the gaming fund. And then the gaming fund is also, has $25,000 in expenditures for removal of approximately 20 large cottonwoods in the park, which are deemed to be a hazard at this time.
So those are in bad shape, and that's why they're coming out?
Yes, that's my understanding.
Are those all in Mackin? Those are all in Mackin Park?
Is there any concentration of location or just all across, park-wide?
Is the red light on?
What I understand is that there are ones that are, when you walk the path over on the north side of the park,
Okay.
that there's a whole line of trees over there that are, need to come out.
Thank you.
After the ones that were removed at the playground off of Howell, I think there's one or two that were cut down there. I know there was a lot of public kind of outcry on that. We've had the arborists go through and deem these, that they like have to come out. There's no saving them. There's no.
Yes, yeah. Kelly's always had people come through, professionals come through and check the trees. And that's why with the trees that we're going to have to remove now, you know, they've also said that they're not in good shape and they could fall over any time.
Okay. The other concern I've heard too is that if we pull those trees out, that the water that stands won't be soaked up by the roots. It's just a thing that I keep hearing people talk about when tree removal comes up. So.
Well, and I'll kind of add to that, because one of my concerns is we've been removing a lot of trees over the years. You know, we removed a big one at the dog park. We've removed others at Mackin. So do we have a plan for bringing in new trees in those areas?
Okay, I had asked Kelly that, and she said, I found out that depending on exactly the cost to remove the trees, we will begin to plant how many we can to stay in budget. Also for the residents, there's, I think the city is going to be buying trees from the trees that were damaged by the emerald oak borer. And so we thought maybe we could, you know, get into some of those if some people didn't want a tree. But she said in the proposed fee, there is money to replace trees. And she has put in a call to Chris Cooper, who has budget together to give me a number of replacements. So, because that was my concern too. We take them out, are we going to put
Right.
something back in?
Yeah, because it takes obviously a long time to grow trees.
Yeah,
So we need to do
yeah.
it quickly. So when
So-
we get that budget, I guess, or when we know kind of what the tree or planting plan is, if you can let us know how many of those are going on public property or parks, in the parks.
Yes, well,
So in other words, you want to know how much of the 25,000 is devoted to taking down trees and how much of it is devoted to replanting trees?
Yes, I want to make sure that we have enough to plant new trees, is the bottom line. Whether it comes
All
out of
right,
this
well,
budget or the city's.
Sure. So, we'll let you know. I don't know if the $25,000 is enough to remove all the trees that I'm told need removing and replant 20 new trees. If you would like to consider a budget amendment at that time to add to that budget, we could suggest that to you at that time.
Yes, and
I
I
think
think-
we're a ways off.
Okay, that's fine. And then the other suggestion she had was when residents or whoever replace trees, if they don't want those trees, they would use those in the park. Is that a viable option?
I'm not sure about that. I think we'd have to take a look at that. Yeah.
Okay.
I agree with Valerie. I think we definitely, you know, if there's money that's needed to replant the trees to keep the park beautiful and shaded, we should do that.
I hope so too.
Sensing from the note that she left that she's taking that into consideration already in the 25,000. The note you just read
Yes,
seems to indicate to me.
I know, that's what it
It's
sounds
confusing
like.
to me, which is probably why Valerie
Yeah,
asked that
so
question.
I guess
It sounds
we'll
like it's part and parcel of that 25,000, when you read the note as opposed to just removal of the trees that we have in front of us.
Very
I know, and
surprised
it's
if-
expensive to remove those
Yeah,
Oh, yes.
20 trees at 25,000, especially those size, there can't be much left over, if any.
I tend to agree with that.
Yeah. One other question in addition to the removal of trees, I brought it up a time or two, is about the shade structure on the Howell parking lot, or the Howell playground. I get questions about that every week, or maybe twice a week. I don't see anything in the budget. Does that mean that we're not looking at it for this fiscal year?
Nothing has been discussed. We've talked about it and have tried to come up with, and I asked Kelly, I said, do we know? And she goes, I don't know if we need to, it's a large area. I don't know if we need to condense the playground equipment. And she said, I don't know if people want shade to sit in, shade over the playground equipment. So I don't know. We'll bring it up at our next meeting and start brainstorming on how we can maybe do something. I don't know.
Concern would be
Trying.
that if it doesn't make the budget now, that it won't happen for another year or more, which I know that people are really upset that it's direct sunlight in the afternoon when
know.
they're off work, and that's the time. I've seen a number of options sent to me, just pictures of stuff that I could forward along if that would be.
Okay. That'd be good. Thank
And
you.
I've received a lot of similar concerns. And no one's asking for a dome. We're not asking for the whole entire, like a movable dome to just cover the shade. But some of it was for sitting for the parents, and some of it was just some area where kids could play on the playground without
I'm sure that,
being totally exposed.
yeah.
And then a few items, if there are no more questions about the gaming fund projects. There are several items that are also funded out of the Convention and Tourism Fund that are related to the Parks and Recreation. One is all of the Friday in the Park concerts, the concerts every Friday from about 11:30 to 1. And the Mayor's Tree Lighting, which is coordinated by Parks and Recreation. The Arts in the Park Festival, which has been going on for a few years now. And then lastly, one that we might want to get some direction from the council, and that's the Summer Concert Series. So Parks, Kelly had suggested that this item be discontinued, citing poor attendance in general and a lot of work to arrange it, given the numbers that were turning out for it. And so I simply intended to honor that suggestion, and then Councilmember Clevenger, I guess, heard something about it and asked if the council might consider continuing to fund it. So it is in the budget at the moment, at the same amount as last year, and the question I guess would ask is, do you want to require Parks and Recreation to put that series on again this coming in the 2020 summer?
Is there a certain page you're reading this off of, or are these your own notes?
No, not in this case. I'm
Okay, all right, okay. That's I was flipping around everywhere, okay.
In general, I will follow the budget message in a moment, but I'm not at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I think this year they had a different, like we heard from Mindy, they had a different marketing campaign, and they had a lot more people, it seems like, this year. I don't, if it's not well attended, certainly we don't want to do it. As far as, competing with other cities, it seems like if you do something anytime, you're going to be competing with someone. But, 3 concerts a year, I think they're good events for families or people that don't want to go listen to live music at bars. I just ask that it would be considered to be put in the budget or not. See if they can continue to do it for another year and give it another year and then reevaluate.
What's the price on this one?
$19,500
It's 3.
for 3.
Does it have anything to do with the not having the shade structure over the stage at this point that's kind of keeping bands or people out?
I hadn't heard that.
I guess, well,
They get
what,
free bands.
why do they not want to re-up on this?
They were citing low attendance along with a lot of work to put it together, so they
Okay.
felt that the combination didn't make it worthwhile to continue.
So even if we have the money, will they do it if we give them?
Well, I imagine so. If you see, if you
I
indicate that
just
you'd
want to make
like it
sure
done.
if we don't, yeah.
I can't imagine, no, I mean, they wouldn't get the money if they didn't do the concerts, but I guess that
yeah,
it's just a somewhat unusual thing for the council to say, we want you to do it even if you don't want to, so I just want to
So-
make,
What about the parks people? How do they feel?
attendance?
that I'm not sure.
Yeah, I was
sir.
wondering about that too.
I'm sorry, Kelly was the one who made the request, I'm sorry, I don't know if,
But if they don't want to do it, then don't have them do it.
Yeah, they
I
don't.
didn't want to force them, I was just, yeah.
So I've been to one or two, and I thought actually there was pretty good attendance, but it all depends on what your definition of good attendance is. So I don't know if there's any targets as far as, or stats that say.
I do
here's how many
understand that the
came,
last
here's-
one was very well attended this year, the last of
All
the
three
three.
were.
So I think they're willing to do it for another year if you'd like to fund it.
We could leave the money in there, and then if they don't want to do
Right.
it, they can advise us and not spend it. I mean,
All right, so I think I'm hearing to go ahead and keep it in and.
One more question. Do you have any other staff that you could allocate to that if it was a staffing issue on their side, or is that just not something?
Not
you
really
wanna
what
get
we
into?
do.
Yeah, no, I know. Okay.
So,
come up there and clean up.
I,
That works.
I'll say no to that
Works,
one,
yeah.
sorry, yeah.
Okay.
I
Sorry.
think, I think programs in the parks, is a management question. To me, if they don't want to do it, then they shouldn't do it. I mean, they govern themselves. I mean, why should we dictate that they have something they don't want to do? And not, I mean, not that it's a bad thing. I don't know. I don't go to them. But I'm one of the ones that wasn't there. But that's, to me, is a management thing.
Now, I think when they had the low attendance, I think it was hard for the workers because the park department people, maintenance people, and the people in the office were coming over to work, and so that kind of put an extra burden on them. But then all of a sudden, everybody, we had Arts in the Park, and there was a concert then, so that was very well attended. And then in July, I did not make that one, but I heard that it was overflowing with people. And then in August, I did go over to that, and there were people, the whole shelter was filled, and people sitting out on the chairs. So all of a sudden, everybody came out. And so we thought, well, okay, we thought we'd go ahead and try it for one more year and see how it goes.
Yeah.
When I speak of workload, by the way, I think that had to do with the planning. So not
Okay,
the
yeah,
actual
yeah.
night of the concert,
Uh-huh.
but the work to find the bands, contract the bands, all of that.
Okay.
Market it.
I agree. If you don't want to do it next year, if you decide I agree, it's a management decision, just don't put it in your budget.
I guess we'll see how it
Yeah,
goes.
my suggestion would be you go ahead and keep it in the budget, and then they can make that call. But we'll let them know that this wouldn't have been what the discussion was.
Not a mandate, yeah.
So I am done with my items, and yes, sir, if you had anything, otherwise, Ms. Larson, did you have anything that you wanted to talk about with the council?
I don't,
Actually,
okay.
Friday in the Park's still good. We're just talking about the park concert series.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
The evening concert series. Yeah,
Okay.
no, there's no concerns about the Friday in the Park concert.
Okay, thank you.
My question was about public works fees. So can we talk about why those increased and what the calculations were and how that happened? I guess they allocate a certain amount of public works fees to Parks and Rec?
Well, they actually, yes, I mean, the municipal services actually keeps a record of exactly what they do in the parks in terms of mowing and other maintenance, and it's just, I think maybe it was being undercharged before.
Okay.
So, but again, they're completely reimbursed for the fees that they pay us.
Do we keep better records now than we used to? Is that why?
I think probably so, yes,
Okay.
yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you for that.
Is there a timetable for the Diamond One field to start?
So right now, the first step in that, if you don't mind, I'm sorry, the first step is to get the agreement with the school district. I think that's a necessary step, is to actually sign that agreement. I think we're close. It's in the city councilor's office now, and as soon as he indicates to me that he and the school district's council have agreement on an agenda, then we'll put it before our respective governing bodies, the school board and the city council. Once that is approved, and you know the basic outlines of that, so I don't foresee any issues. Then the next step would be to obtain a designer. My intention would be to put together a committee that would include any council members who are interested, park board members who are interested, school district folks, maybe a couple each from each of those bodies, to work, to evaluate proposals that may come in from designers, and then to work with the chosen designer on designing the improvements. So, and then once those are designed, we would put it out to bid. So
Doesn't
that's
sound
kind of the
like
steps,
it-
but the first step is to get that agreement with the school district.
Doesn't sound like it'd be ready for their season.
I do not think it will be ready for
No.
the spring season, no, sir. I think that's not. not in the cards.
Just curious.
Yeah, I think we're looking at spring of 2021.
Yeah.
Do we have any timeline on the shade for the stage down there? I mean,
Okay, I'd asked Kelly about that. And what she said was the original structure style proposal was going to attach to the existing stage roof and shelter roof. Though engineering plans and original structural engineers stated it could not hold the weight. So we had to go back to the drawing board with engineering to add multiple support beams that could handle the weight of the material. It is just a very time-consuming process for the vendor and engineer. We are all set to bid after October 1st, and I have spoken to Public Works to assist with the bid process. So they had to just reinforce that what's there now so that they could add.
how many people have they contacted to build this, do you know?
That I don't know.
I don't even want to bring it.
Ms. Larson, did you have anything else that you wanted to talk about about the Parks Board, the Parks and Recreation Fund budget with the council? Or the
No.
Parks program in general?
No, I don't think so unless they have.
Do you have any other
something else.
questions about Parks Recreation?
Come back after you get those cottonwood trees out if you need more trees.
You want the trees, okay.
You want the trees, want
And new
priorities.
trees.
Pro trees, we're an Arbor Day city.
Big trees.
The Diamond 2 looks good. The work you done there,
Yeah, that looks really nice.
yeah.
I will add on the bike rack, I did see 5 bikes parked at it. It's the Confident City Cycling.
How many?
Class. There was 5.
Really?
Yeah, we got 5.
Look
in
to
there.
that thing?
Yeah. Yep.
They must be close friends.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then the other budget to present to you prior to getting into the general fund and other funds would be the library fund budget. Just a couple words on that. That is governed by the library board. And the library director, Vicki Lewis, is here tonight. In this proposed budget, property taxes provide 98% of the revenues for this fund. The library also has its own levy, and obviously it's almost entirely funded by property taxes. Library board's budgeted an $86,000 operating deficit, which will result in a projected fund balance at the end of the fiscal year of just under $1 million. So their fund balance is quite healthy. There is one capital project funded out of the gaming fund for the library, and that's tuck pointing cracked mortar in the bricks in the oldest part of the library at $16,000.
What is tuck point?
They take out the loose mortar, then replace it.
Okay. I just wasn't sure what that was.
So with that, I'll turn it over to Vicki Lewis for any remarks that she'd like to make on behalf of the library.
Not at the library.
Good evening, everyone. Just a few things I'd like to mention about our budget. We've made some changes with the, excuse me, most of the salary and wages is staying the same. Although we've incorporated a 4%, possible 4% increase on salaries, it will be on merit-based in its annual review. We have decreased about 1,000 hours of staff hours due to the fact that this is the first year that we've staffed the lower level for the full year, every day, all day, and we kind of overestimated last year thinking how many hours it would take to staff it, so we've been able to adjust that a little bit, so our total fund for the salaries and wages is about the same as it was before. There was a considerable increase, though, in our benefits. The health insurance was increased by about $23,000. That's just for 5 employees, so that's about a 37% increase. That hit pretty hard. We did make a decrease in educational and training fund. We just kind of evaluated what we've done the past 5 years and went with what we figured was a good average. Other services, we decreased by $18,000, mostly for the Clay County Sheriffs that we get to assist us with security. We haven't really required them as many hours as we thought we might. They do come over after school on a few days. We have someone that we also have on our salary on our payroll that comes over and works too, so we've been able to reduce that a little bit. We've had a small decrease in our automation services. just because we made a change in our library software management system recently, and we made a adjustment last year to reflect that change. However, we were able to lower it again by $2,000 because it's a lot less expensive than the one we had previously. Our minor equipment budget line is going down by a considerable amount. We had $10,000 budgeted last year to purchase a new telephone system, which we did install, and so we can reduce it by that amount. And then we also received grants last year from the state. We had 2 separate grants. So the budget line was increased to incorporate the revenue that we earned from those grants. Plus, we had matching funds that we had to put in the revenue for that. We can reduce this fund by about $55,000 to offset those items. We're going to apply for a couple of grants again this next year for new computers throughout the library. Matching funds were not included in this budget for those. We are hoping that maybe we can get a grant where the matching funds are minimal, but if they are a little bit higher than that, then we can discuss it with the board and see if we want to go ahead and apply for their grant and pay the matching fund, which is usually between 20 and 25% if there's any at all. We had a little bit in minor furniture last year to buy new shelving and things for the lower level and some furniture for our makerspace that we created in the lower level. We can reduce that fund balance by that $10,000. Our journals and periodicals, the print journals and periodicals that we house in the library, that collection, we're reducing it by $1,000. There are several magazines you can't even buy in print anymore. So every year they're just dropping them a little by little. We do have a lot of them that are electronically and you can view them online, but the print magazines are going down, so we reduced that by $1,000. Our audiovisual collection last year, we added a couple $1,000s extra into that budget line. We wanted to beef it up just a little bit, so we did that, and so this year we can drop that $2,000 down since we got it up to where we want it to be. All in all, that's about all the changes we made to the budget this year. Anybody have any questions about anything?
When the school finally does get operational, do you think you'll be able to cut your security people more, or?
It's very possible. We've already noticed that the students that do come over now, and we still get, there is still truancy, and there's still kids that come over every day when they should be in class. They do come over for lunchtime too, which, you know, they're off campus for lunch, that's fine. But the ones that are coming over now don't cause as many problems. Most of them are just coming over there, studying, socializing with their friends, you know, pretty good. We have the occasional one that's, you know, causes problems. But for the most part, they're not bad. And we've noticed last year at the beginning of the second semester, like in January when school started again, they kind of cracked down on the truancy a little bit at the high school. And counselors were kind of watching the students a little better, making sure they were in class and things. And we noticed a difference in that too. This year, school started fresh. It's kind of started. They're around quite a bit. But, you know, like I said, for the most part, they don't cause problems. So we might be able to, if they close the campus, we might be able to reduce that and cut it back. We still have adults in the library that sometimes it's nice to have security around. And, yeah, so sometimes it's nice to have somebody there that we can always, you know, lean on and whatever. But however, North Kansas City Police Department's always there for us too, and they've always responded very well when we've called them for assistance.
Thank you.
I had a question about that. Health insurance costs, probably more for Shirley or Casey, but how are those, how are the health insurance costs allocated? Are they just allocated by body, by person, into the different areas, into the different cost centers or budget centers?
Yes.
Okay.
So it's the individuals and
It's just the number of
according to the plan they
individuals
have, and
okay.
yes.
It's not based on any health issues or, okay, thank you.
Two quick things.
Uh-huh.
First off, actually, you guys do an awesome job over there. My wife and I and our baby, we love going to the library.
Well, thank you.
Question about the miscellaneous revenue there. It looks like it's just kind of dropped off the table. Is that late fees that are just not being?
Correct. Last year, at the library and the library board decided to no longer collect overdue fees. So anyone that checks out an item, if they're a day late, a week late, or whatever, we don't charge them. Used to we charged 10 cents a day, maximum $1 an item. We felt like that was a barrier to some families and to some patrons that were either afraid to check out too many items, or afraid if they were late. You know, if you had a family with 2 or 3 children, each child wanted to check out 10 books, that could rack up really fast. Different people have limited income that they can spend on late fees. We didn't want to hinder their ability to, they could utilize other parts of the library, but if they couldn't check out, they may not come back. So we decided to drop the overdue fees. We do charge, if they lose the item and they don't bring it back, they will get charged, but we're not charging for just overdue fees.
Is that where the 6,500 is still if we're not doing late fees?
Correct.
Overdue fees?
Yeah, and other miscellaneous things, we do charge for printing. You know, if people print color, black and white, we do charge for notary. We have a notary, and we charge for that. We charge for faxing. There's a few things like that we do charge for. However, most of that is offset by our supplies that we have to purchase for that too. But still, it's built into the expenses.
When you made that change in policy with regards to the late fees, did you find that you have an increase or decrease in the percentage of people who have late books or?
Well, we haven't really reviewed the late part of it, the ones that are lost and are billed for lost. It's been about steady, about the same as what it was before. Some people are just going to forget to return them. They're going to be lost. We have seen that people are returning them once they are lost, where before if they weren't, you know, some people never return them. We just have books that for 10 years have been lost and never returned. But we found that once they receive that notice that they're lost, then they return them. We're thinking that maybe it's because they're not, whenever they're overdue, they're sent notices that they're overdue, but they're thinking, okay, I don't have to pay anything, so maybe they aren't returning them. But then when it's lost, they're like, oh my gosh, I better return that now. We just had an upgrade on our library management software system, and I believe that there's a function in there where we can automatically renew their books for them, and we're going to investigate that. This just happened last Friday, so we haven't had much time really to delve into it. But we're going to try to automatically renew their books for them so that, you know, if they're thinking in their head, well, it's due, but I haven't got there yet, it'll be okay, I don't have to owe anything, at least we can get it renewed for them so that it won't be considered lost, you know, for a little bit more time. Because every time you renew it, then that postpones that lost date.
I just want to take a second before everyone heads out to thank everyone at the Parks and Rec Board and the Library Board for contributing to the city, and it definitely leads to a higher quality of life here. I know my kids are always out at the park, and my kids are always at the Tuesday night at the library with the kids reading, so thank you.
Anything else?
Good job.
Thank you, Vicki. Thank you, members of the Parks Board and the Library Board for being here tonight. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and give you an overview of the city budget, focusing not so much on capital, which our intention would be, although we're happy to try to answer any questions you have about anything, but our intention would be to try to focus on the capital projects next meeting, a week from tonight. First of all, I would like to thank all of the folks who are sitting up here for all the hard work on putting together this budget. Putting together a budget is quite a bit of toil and sweat, and it does require a lot of tough decisions on the part of the department directors. I'd like to thank Shirley for all the work she does in putting this document together as well. So I am going to, generally speaking, follow the budget message that is in your packet, although I won't try to go through it verbatim. But just to do a recap of things, so the city budget as a whole, in all the different funds that we have in the budget, we are budgeted in fiscal year 2020 to spend about $64 million. Most of that is on salaries and benefits. We are primarily a service organization, and most of our operating expenditures are personnel related. Personnel costs comprise about 81% of general fund budgeted expenditures in fiscal year 2020. The fiscal year 19 budget, the fiscal year 2020 budget is scheduled to go up about 1.5 full-time equivalents. We'll have about 190 employees citywide. That does include parks and library. Of note in that increase, which we can talk about when we get to the police department budget, is that we are budgeting about 1.5 additional personnel in the police department, which we can talk about the rationale for that. And then in parks, it's gone up about 0.5 person because they dropped the contract cleaning of the Parks and Recreation Center that they had guess they had some concerns about that. They're using now an employee for that work. So that explains most of the increase there. The compensation expenditures that we have are comprised mainly of wages, pension and retirement benefits, and health insurance. In terms of wages, this fiscal year budget is assuming a 4% merit-based increase for full-time, non-union represented employees. A number of our employees are union represented, either with Local 42 in the fire department or with the Fraternal Order of Police in the police department. But for the non-represented employees, we have a 4% increase in the aggregate budgeted in this budget. And non-represented employees are evaluated and compensated according to the pay-for-performance system in the compensation plan, which was approved by the council and updated recently. The wage assumptions in the collective bargaining agreement with Local 42 are assumed in this budget. In fiscal year 2020, we calculate that the increase for those employees would be about 4 1/3%, a little bit more than the 4% that's budgeted for non-represented employees. And the representative employees of the FOP are budgeted to receive the increases that are called for according to the recently negotiated collective bargaining agreement, which has not been formally put to you for approval. It's actually up for a vote tonight. Okay, so hopefully that will be ratified by them tonight, and then it'll be before you at your next meeting, but we have talked to you about it privately. And so those assumptions are budgeted in this budget. And this year, it'll vary from year to year, but this year, those increases for the represented police employees actually come to closer to 5%, about 4.84%. So it is generally my goal to try to put non-represented employees on a par with the union represented employees. In this year's budget, they are budgeted to receive a little bit less in the aggregate, but still a very healthy 4% increase is budgeted, which in all honesty is a lot more than most cities are doing.
Does that include the pay raises that came out of the compensation study?
Yes. Yes, it does. In terms of pension and retirement, police and fire employees are part of the police and fire employee retirement plan, which is mainly funded by a property tax levy, also includes a city contribution and also an employee contribution into that system. That's an independent budget. It's not shown in this document. The city's other employees are participate in the Missouri Local Government Employee Retirement System, commonly called loggers. The city participates at the L6 level in this system, which is the richest level in the logger system. Also, the city is a contributory member, meaning that we pay both the employer share and the employee share. A lot of other cities are non-contributory. They pay the employer share, but not the employee share. So we do well in terms of the benefits that we provide, both our police, fire, and other employees. Loggers' costs are going down about 0.8% according to the logger system. That's their decision, so that's good. It's been going down for a few years now, so their investments are doing well. And for all full-time employees, in addition, another retirement benefit that we have is that the city matches employee contributions up to 3% for the 457 defined benefit plans that we have. So those are the pension benefits that we provide here in the city. Health insurance. So as it states in the letter, we have budgeted a 25% increase. That is based upon what Lockton Companies, our broker, has told us at the time that this budget was put together, that they were the increase that they were getting indicated by Blue Cross Blue Shield. The Lockton has been able to get that down. I just got a number yesterday.
Good.
So, well, it's still high, but it's quite a bit better. It's 19%. Now, we will meet with Lockton here in a little bit to see if there are any other things that we can do that might get that rate down further, but it would be a trade-off in terms of higher copays or higher deductibles or something. But we'll look at other possibilities that might be available. Lockton is scheduled to be before you October 1st to present the renewal to you. But that's what's right now in the budget. The numbers are based upon 25%. 19% saves about $68,000 in the general fund. Yes, sir.
And I know in past years, past 2 years, we've had very minimal increases, right?
Yes.
Is that correct? So we've been lucky.
Our experience lately is we have a massive increase. We've had a couple of those followed by some really good years. So maybe next year will be a good year. From talking to Lockton, who, we don't see individuals and what's happening with individuals, but we do get information about the workforce as a whole. We have a relatively small number of employees with some big claims, some fairly significant health conditions, and that is what is causing our rates to. Our usage is going way up, and so because of that, our rates are up.
We don't want to raise their copays and everything out of the roof, too, for them to be
No.
able to come up with, so.
No.
You're just warning us now, then?
I am, yes.
Okay.
But
I don't think we're alone in this problem.
I don't know,
No.
probably not.
So, that's the compensation in a nutshell. I'd like to talk about the general fund's projected performance for this fiscal year that we're in, fiscal year 2019. We began the year with about $300,000 more than we had expected when we presented the budget to you at this time last year. We projected a surplus this year of about $346,000. We're now projecting a surplus of about $1.4 million. So the general fund is doing quite well this year, according to our projections. Revenues are projected to go up at the end of the year about over $500,000, about 3.5% higher than originally budgeted. Some of the revenues, the trends are maybe a little bit concerning. We have to keep an eye on them. Revenue from franchise fees is projected to come in slightly lower. We think that this might have to do, especially with electricity, the fact that it was a much cooler summer than it has been in years past, meaning less electrical use for air conditioning. But we'll see after another summer. Sales tax revenue is also projected lower than budgeted. We think that might also be affected by lower electricity use, which also pays, sales tax is paid on that in addition to franchise fee. But that certainly bears watching, because for sales taxes, the trend had been upwards for several years. But there are good signs on the business, in terms of what looks like business news. Business license revenue is projected to come in 6% higher than budgeted, and building permit revenues 66% higher. So this would seem to indicate a good continuing climate for business. We just need to keep an eye on it, but some of these numbers are reflected in the proposed budget that I'll talk about in a moment. Investment earnings are way up. Shirley advises me that we've got a lot more money that's invested, and the interest rates have been better.
Are you able to say, like, what triggered that? Is it rates going up, like prime going up with the Federal Open Market Committee, or are we just outperforming what we expected?
A few years back, the council allowed us to change our investment policy. We're very restricted on what we can invest government funds in. We can't do mutual funds, we can't do bonds or securities. We can pretty much only do CDs and government securities. And the interest rates have gone up. The council at that time approved letting us to invest it for a longer period.
Okay, so go out on
Which
the yield curve.
we're earning more interest because we can go out further.
Yep.
We used to only be able to go out a year, now we can go out 3.
Okay.
Makes a big difference.
Yeah, unless the yield curve inverts, which
Yeah,
we've
it
done.
happened.
All bears close watch.
Yeah.
Yep. Expenditures for the year are projected to end about $500,000 lower than we had budgeted, about 3.2%. As is often the case, a lot of that's in public safety. Frankly, police and fire have vacancies through the course of the year, and partly for that reason, they often come in lower on the personnel expenses than we had budgeted. We budgeted with an assumption that we will be fully staffed all year long, and that usually is not the case in those departments. Getting to the fiscal year 2020 budget, for fiscal year 2020, revenues are projected to increase very minimally, about 0.4%, very flat, in other words. Projected tax revenue, property tax revenues budgeted to increase by 2.3%. You did just set the tax rate, and assessed values increased almost 16%, but then we had to decrease the rate by 12% to make up for that. But we are seeing a small increase in property tax revenue from growth. Franchise, we are based upon what we're seeing in fiscal year 2019, we are budgeting less in franchise tax and sales tax. And so we have tables in there that show what we're expecting in terms of revenues, as I said, very flat. In terms of expenditures, public safety is the bulk of our expenditures in the general fund, about 37% of the general fund and for fire, and 33 or 34% for police. We are budgeting a 6.5% increase from the fiscal year 2019 amount in 2020 in the general fund. This does result in a deficit that's shown in your document of about $665,000. In years past, we've budgeted, I've given you a budget that had large deficits. Last year, we showed a surplus. The general fund balance at the end of fiscal year 20, even with that deficit, is budgeted to be about 90% of operating expenditures. It's our policy to maintain it at 50%, so we're in good shape there. The deficit's due to a number of factors that I would point out, one being the very small projected increase in revenues that we're projecting, fairly robust compensation increase, addition of some personnel, a 1.5 FTE in police, and the large health insurance increase that's projected. I'm hopeful that it won't be as high as that. As I indicated, actually, the health insurance will not be quite as high. It's possible that the franchise tax and sales tax, that this was an anomaly this year, and those will bounce back. And honestly, we usually do a bit better each year than we budget to do. But that's where we are at the moment it's what's been proposed to you. Any questions about the general fund generally before I move on to other funds?
One other question about investment piece. Do we use any service like CDARS or to shop around for the rates on the CDs?
I go out for a bid on every investment. We usually get about 5 brokers bid, and we take the one with the best yield.
The reason I was in banking for like 9 years doing on the audit side, and I saw a lot of cities would go through things like Quick Rate, where it's like the online posted board of all the rates shopped across the country. And they can sometimes get a lot higher return, especially if you're willing to go out a couple years on CDs. Banks are
Actually, right now, I'm not getting any of the banks who want to buy,
they don't want to buy the CD money. Yeah,
They don't want to sell us a CD.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, then I'm going to go ahead and move on to some of the other funds, aside from the general fund, for a quick overview. The gaming fund is the repository of funds from gross revenues and admissions from Harrah's Casino. It's a primary source of funding for capital improvements or for unusual services out of the general fund. Casino activity decreased each year from 2010 to 2018. We did see a little uptick in 2019. We are budgeting fairly conservatively for fiscal year 2020, just based upon the trend that we had seen since 2010. But in general, seems like things maybe are leveling off there in terms of the decline that we've been seeing in casino revenue. We'll hope so.
Yeah, except Gordon Ramsay's coming, so it's gonna start climbing up.
I did see some commentary about that good luck opening a steakhouse in Kansas City. So we'll see. But
There's less than they used to be.
Right.
Now we're the barbecue city.
Right.
Lost a lot of good steakhouses.
Right. So as I
Nobody
say,
likes barbecue.
all the capital projects that are funding out of gaming, we are planning on addressing next week. So I was going to go ahead and move on from that, if I might. Transportation fund is supported by a half-cent sales tax. The amended transportation fund was budgeted to have a $450,000 operating deficit in fiscal year 2019. It won't be quite that high. We're looking at about $377,000 now. In fiscal year 20, the fund's budgeted to have about a $303,000 operating deficit, and that'll leave the fund balance at 25.5% versus a policy of a minimum of 25%. To be honest with you, I had to do a little bit of cutting to even get it above 25%. But I wanted to do that. I do want to give you, a warning of, sort of storm cloud on the horizon as far as the transportation fund. that fund balance has been declining for years now. We've seen a downward trend there. And as I look at the transportation fund balance, I'm not seeing a whole lot of discretionary spending, except for one thing that I would point out. It's a service that I know is very popular, but it is also very expensive, and that's the Metroflex service. That is, we projected to cost us about $328,000 in the fiscal year 2020 fund. We've calculated the cost per ride to be over $15 a ride. We charge 25 cents. Even if we increased it to $1, it would be a drop in the bucket. So I don't think trying to charge more is going to be the solution. So as long as we continue to fund that at the level that we're doing, at the level of service that we're providing. Of course, we had tried to look at some alternatives with KCATA which kind of fell apart due to union issues that they were having. But we'll still look at those as we can. They've indicated they're still interested if they can further that idea with discussions with their folks. But I think that, and it may be as early next year, that I may need, as much as I don't want to do it, if we continue to fund the service in this way, that I may be proposing that we do it out of the gaming fund. Because, with $303,000 deficit in this fund, that service alone costs $328,000. It's easy to see where we would look. But other than that, a lot of the expenses in there, street lights, traffic signals, things like that, are not really discretionary. We fund tree maintenance out of that budget. We have a lot of trees in this city, and a lot of street trees.
Need more.
Yeah, right. And now you want us to buy more.
No,
These aren't
I
on-
hear about it.
These aren't on the roads, though. These would be in the park.
There are things, but I mean, every year, frankly, we seem to be exceeding the tree maintenance budget. So there are very few discretionary expenses that I see in the transportation fund. So that's just something to bear in mind.
One question on that. Seems to be more and more talk of KCATA going to a free bus service. If that were to happen, is there any idea of what kind of impact that would have?
No.
for us?
Somebody'd have to pay.
Yeah.
I mean, they may not charge customers, but
Yeah,
no, they haven't had discussions with us
I
about that.
just see it keep popping up. So I would
No, you're right. I've seen that too, and I don't know how much. I honestly don't know how much of their expenses they really recover from rider fees.
Yeah.
And whether it's all that significant for them.
All right. Thank you.
I applaud the effort to keep it at the 25.5%. The question I would have, though, is this is one of the funds that we've been approving kind of rolling amendments this year as, things have gone wrong, traffic signals, we need to do some road repair.
Yeah.
Would it make more sense to just, plan to be at 20% so that we don't have to continually amend the budget as we go through the year, if there really is that much spending that could be anticipated?
Well, it's your policy to have 25%. If you want to change it, that's your discretion to change that policy. But until you do, we're going to try to do our best, although we're not having much success in one of the other funds that I'll get to here.
So I would be interested this next year in entertaining some brainstorming on the bus services. And, I mean, I agree with you that at the end of the day, if we can't find a good alternative, if we decide to keep it, it needs to probably come from gaming because it's a expense that we're asking for. But I would be interested to know, like, we have such interesting transportation options these days. The bus is sort of like really kind of old school. And so I'm wondering what other options there are that are out there, if we could do some sort of voucher system where residents could get vouchers for, transportation, something along those lines that is more on an as-needed basis as opposed to paying for Metroflex that's there all the time, even if there's not hardly any riders on it. So I'd just be interested in looking at different options. Again, re-looking at options.
We could do bike taxis.
There you go. You could almost pay for Uber for every
Yeah,
resident.
that's exactly what I was thinking.
Probably could.
With
For less than
I know some people use it for work, but, I mean, you could do peak
self-driving
time.
cars come pick you up and take you places. I don't know, I just think we need to look at
We
some
need to look
options
at it,
and look at what other cities are doing and, who maybe have, I'm sure this is unusual, but.
Convention and tourism. The revenues from this come from the hotel tax. We are seeing slightly lower revenues than were projected for this fiscal year. Not
Eric,
sure what that means. Yes, sir.
the hotels in One North that are gonna go up, those are not going to have this convention and tourism
Correct.
tax, correct?
What the revenue that they collect from that will put back into the development,
All right,
according to our agreement with the master developer.
thank you. I just wanted to clarify.
Right. This fund is used for funds to support Snake Saturday, Arts in the Park Festival, other events that bring the city, folks to the city from out of town. It's also being used to fund the new gateway monument signage at entrances to town, such as the Arch and other monument signage that we've been having planned. The next one that we're working on is located at Armour and where the new QT will be, at basically Armour and Ozark around there, at Armour and I-35. Also, this is the fund in which the next 3 phases of the Armour Road Complete Street Project are budgeted, which will be the subject of your work session on September 17th. Community Center Fund. As you know, we began an arrangement with the YMCA in 2015. If the facility realizes an annual surplus, the city and the Y will share equally in that surplus. The city covers any deficits completely. So far, every year, there's been a deficit, but as we've been reporting to you monthly, right now they're in surplus. We still will pay. There'll still be a net expenditure for the city because they get a management fee. But to see their operating budget currently in surplus is a good sign. And that means less money has to come out of the gaming fund to budget the community center fund budget. Communications Fund, this is what funds the Link City Network. We did enter into a settlement agreement with Noxix earlier this year. And so past amounts for deficits with them, which we share in equally, we have not yet paid because we had never received an audit. I just received, a very short time ago, the audit for the last 5 years. Haven't had a chance to review it yet, but under the assumption that those costs will pan out, that's what we are showing, that those back payments in this year's budget. The Water Fund. Presentation of this fund's budget is skewed because of the water treatment plant project, which is about a $14 million project. We had been paying for that out of gaming, but we do it by transfer to the water fund. We've got the remainder of the project budget being transferred into the water fund this year. So after that project's completed, we'll get a better picture for how it goes in terms of operating revenues and operating expenditures. But in general, the fund's doing quite well, as we've talked about. When you take that water treatment plant out of consideration, we are looking at a fund balance at the end of this year, absent any action, of almost $5 million, which is about 280% of budgeted expenses versus 25% policy. So, as we've had some discussion about, I am proposing this year to move $3 million of that back into the gaming fund. The justification being that the council made a decision to use the gaming fund to pay for that project in order to keep water rates down. Otherwise, if the water fund had funded that project, we probably would have been looking at issuing a revenue bond and then having to raise rates. But because of this, we didn't require that. But given that the fund balance is as good as it is, I think it makes some sense to transfer that back into gaming. And even with that $3 million transfer, we'll be at about 110% of budgeted operating expenditures. So we might even look at more the next year, but I thought I'd cap it at $3 million this year.
I have a question.
Yes,
On one of the line items for the apartment sales for water, page 187, have we factored in, or do we maybe haven't factored in the new apartments that are going in at One North?
Now, you said 187, sir?
It means 167.
167.
Oh, very good. Okay, thank you.
Or 168, maybe.
Right.
No, sir, we haven't.
And that's just because we don't know what
That's
kind of
right.
water usage.
Yeah, we like to base it upon what we actually know.
And so if those are done in the fiscal year and selling water, then we may come in higher on that item then. It's a
Could be.
possibility.
Yes, sir, that's possible.
That's something that's been kind of the ongoing discussion is the continued water valve issues and the delivery system.
Right.
I don't know, now's the time, or we want to talk about it during capital expenditure, Pete. But my question would be, what are we going to do to get ahead of this as these valves are continuing? We're scared to operate them. Businesses are scared to move the valve if there's any reason.
Right.
We've got this money sitting in the fund. We could transfer it to the gaming fund and then send it back when we decide what we're going to do to fix stuff. But has there been discussion about?
Yes.
Okay.
So we do have a multi-year plan that we've devised, and we have $300,000. That's the emergency repairs item that you see in capital outlay on page 174. We think that's sufficient to replace several valves,
Right.
exercise more valves, and plan for some breakage when we exercise them. So we think that's, we are trying to get ahead of this and make sure that the valves we have are workable and exercised. And Pat and I have been working to put together a plan for doing that over a several-year period. So our intention to get a handle on that in this year's budget and with the year's budgets to come.
Okay. The idea of the emergency repair versus getting the out in front of it, because it becomes more expensive to fix once it's broken. I imagine.
I call it emergency repair, but we kind of plan it. We're planning
okay.
on. So maybe it's a
little
misnomer.
Proactive and reactive.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The
we
proactive
actually,
emergency.
that includes the
Proactive
proactive program, and perhaps it would be better labeled something different, but that's where we were planning on.
Okay, because I have started hearing from business owners too that are, they're just afraid of valve breakage and.
Yeah, well, it's bad. We don't want that to happen. So we need to move forward to replace those valves that are bad in a carefully programmed way.
Right. Right.
Yes. So that if we do that, we're ready and we won't put people out of service. I'll talk about the Water Pollution Control Fund. Gosh, you're aware of the problems in that fund, I think. I won't belabor them. I mean, we've talked about the issues that we've had with measuring the amount of sewage that we sent to Kansas City, which we believe we have a handle on now, but it took our fiscal year 2019 budget took a big hit for that, and we've got a large amount budgeted in fiscal year 2020. And then the news just, it really is bad with regard to the substantial number of sinkholes that we have in the Paseo Industrial District. In the budget, we indicated an amount of $410,000, which was the best number we had at the moment that we put this budget together. I actually think it's going to be substantially more than that based upon the most recent figures that Pat's given me, which are based upon the amounts that have been given to us by the contractor we've got working out there. It's been hard to get an exact handle on those expenses because they haven't had all the invoices come in from their subs. But yeah, this fund is not in great shape, and right now I may well be even coming. I don't propose at this time to change the numbers that are in here, but I did, as we had talked about, it is budgeted to take care of the capital projects for WPC out of gaming this year, and in addition, as I indicated in the materials in your packet, I have budgeted, subject to your approval, of course, in fiscal year 2020, to transfer an additional $410,000 from gaming for the sinkhole repairs in the PID, which actually could probably be, I hate to say it, another $250,000 more. We're looking more at $650,000 at this point.
When you say sinkhole repair, what exactly do you mean? How does that
So
fall
these
into the
are-
water control?
So what's happening is that due to the hydrostatic pressure and issues, the ground underneath our storm sewers is unstable. Voids are being created, and then the storm sewers collapse.
So
And
this
when the
is
storm
just-
sewers collapse, the
Yeah.
pavement that's over them then collapses as
Okay,
well,
so
and
this
that's
is-
the sinkhole.
This is the cost from basically the
To
sewer
replace-
all the way up to the street.
Correct.
Okay.
To repay,
That's enough.
to repair or replace the storm sewer, in some cases, many linear feet of storm sewer, and then, having done that, to then repair the street above them.
Okay.
Yes.
Is there anything that can be done to prevent sinkholes?
Well, the one
our
thing,
power.
really, the best thing we can do is to try to advance diagnose future issues. So to that end, and that's about the best we can do, I mean, it could yield really bad news, but at least we'll be able to plan for it, as opposed to this year when it caught us completely, frankly, by surprise. So we have $50,000 in the WPC fund to perform video investigation of all of the storm sewers in the PID, so that we can see if there are any.
Like weak areas.
Yeah, now what it may not tell us what's gonna happen underneath them if we have more flooding issues. And, that's a worry because, some of the predictions we've seen have said that there may be high river levels in future years as well. But we're going to try as best we can to at least diagnose the condition of the sewers that we have to see if there are any issues that we need to be addressing. But after we do the video investigation, it may tell us that we have a lot of repairs that we need to plan for. But better to know about it than not to know about it. That's about it, though. I don't know of any other.
No drainage options or additional.
Yeah, well, these things are
sewers
used
or
for
anything.
drainage. That's the
I mean,
problem. Yeah. So.
Yeah, but anything, I don't know, any more that you can add or any rerouting of, I'm just
No.
curious.
Pat, what about that product that they use to line the pipes? If we lined all of these with that polymer that holds them up together?
That would be a very expensive program. These are minimum 48 inches concrete pipes.
Okay. I didn't know if that
We have
price
lined
come
all
down.
of our sanitary sewers. We
Right.
did that in years past.
The lining
But those are
storm sewers.
much less diameter.
Right.
These are huge.
Yeah, they're
pipes.
big pipes. I don't know if they had a different price point for that or a different product.
So, other than that, we have a few funds that we keep. The retiree health insurance fund, which we'll be able to close out in a few years. Northgate, we are making some changes in the Northgate Capital Project Fund, reflecting the new start that we have there. So right now, we've taken all of the infrastructure costs that we had per our last development agreement, and we're not budgeting for that. But we know that, and we are preparing an RFP for the super block area, and we'll see what comes of that. And we know that there will be negotiated expenses. So there will probably be changes in this budget during the course of the year, but we based it upon what we know now. And then we do have a few restricted funds where the funds go in, they can only be used for certain purposes. One of those is the Crummett Fund, and as you know, we've drawn that down some in the last year, and we'll probably draw it down further with the Crummett Beautification Fund Committee's recommendations.
What's the balance in the fund now, in the Crummett?
So that is standing at, I'm looking at page 199, $119,000 is what's currently showing. Began at 208. So, with that, we can begin talking, just kind of going through and talking about departments. I and the department heads will hit on some highlights. It was not our intention to go through the significant budgetary issues in any great detail, but we thought we might try to hit some highlights for you and then answer any questions on each departmental budget that you might have if we can. You ready? Okay. So we'll begin with administration, which begins on page 22. There are a couple of things that I would point out in administration that might be of interest to you. First of all, we do have a significantly higher budget that we're proposing for professional services. We do have a couple of surveys in there that we would recommend to you. One is the citizen satisfaction survey. We last did that 3 years ago next year. We should do those at least every 2 to 3 years. So when we had it done last time, some of the council members indicated 3 years might be fine. So that's what we've got when we've budgeted about what we expect it to be based upon our discussions with our survey company. We also have budgeted in this particular budget a fraud risk assessment. The Assistant City Administrator, Kim Nakahota, and I, we received a presentation at our City Managers Association conference that we had this year, which really was a little bit scary, opened our eyes. I mean, we all know that the possibility of fraud exists, but there are really many possibilities in any municipal government. You may have heard of a documentary movie called All the Queen's Horses about a terrible theft that occurred in Illinois town. I think it would really be very beneficial to us, especially now with our finance manager planning to retire in March, for us to have somebody come in from the outside and assess where our vulnerabilities might be. I know, by the way, that same presentation is being given at the MML conference that's coming up. So those of you who are attending, I'd recommend it to you. It's the same gentleman that we heard. He gives a good presentation, and he really points out some alarmist statistics. So I think that would be something that we should engage in this year, and would be worth our while, and it's just good practice. We also have in this budget, we have been doing strategic planning process every couple of years, and so we are planning on doing that again and have budgeted an amount accordingly in this budget.
One question on the fraud risk audit. How
Yeah.
often would you anticipate doing that, though?
Oh,
Like every-
that's a good question. I don't think every year, no.
Yeah.
Maybe every 5 years or
Okay.
so.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Moving on to municipal court, which is actually under the supervision of the Assistant City Administrator. We don't really have there isn't much to say about court, but if you have any questions, we'd be happy to try to answer them.
Oh, that falls under Kim? Oh, okay, I didn't know that. Thank you.
I have delegated that.
Yes, I see. That's an excellent job.
And moving on to the fire department. Before I turn things over to Chief Hargis, well, no, I'll go ahead and turn things over to Dave, and then if there's anything you don't hit that I think we should, I'll join in. So go ahead, Dave.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm going to just kind of hit some highlights of stuff that we may have increased our budget for and the reasons for that. One of the significant ones is in our education and training. We added an additional $28,000 there for paramedic school. As I've talked to you before, that's one of our challenges right now is keeping and retaining paramedics and getting them to apply. And traditionally, we found that growing them from the inside works best. So we have been successful right now. We have 4 people in school. We just hired one, and this is budgeted to send 4 more to pay their tuition for 4 more. So in about 2.5 years, we'll have 8 additional paramedics that we don't have right now. So that's what that additional funding and the education and trainings to help grow our paramedics from inside, so that we take care of that retention and the ability to attract them. So. In our professional services, we added $9,700 for a company called Lexipol. They currently do the SOPs for the police department now. It's an organization, they come in, they look at the state laws and best practices in the industry, and they work with us to tailor legally defensible SOPs. They routinely go through them for us and with us, and they provide us training on them on a daily basis. They have what's called daily training bulletins. They send out a little scenario that takes like 2 minutes, and then you utilize your SOPs to how you would handle that scenario. So I think with our staffing now, it's really difficult to stay on top of the SOPs, and I think this is a really good way to spend those funds to help us out there. Our uniforms and apparel, for the last several years, our lieutenants, captains, and chiefs have had dress uniforms, blazers to wear at events like our pinning. I know most of you have seen the officers there. And when we had the funeral for one of our members last year, it became apparent that it would be a lot better if all of our members had a dress uniform to wear at those occasions when they did that. So this is additional funding put in to have all of our firefighters, drivers, all the department members, once they get off probation and become regular employees, to have a dress uniform to wear at formal events such as funerals and pinnings and things like that. Our equipment and vehicle maintenance have both increased with our equipment and our vehicles both becoming more, having more electronic components and running more calls. Our costs are going up to get them repaired, and it's something that we we've pushed back against the last couple of years. We've been right at the budgets. This year, we've gone over and had to transfer some money for other lines to cover those. So I've asked for some additional funds on there so that we can cover those. With the addition of a new apparatus this year, hopefully those will go down and we won't need to utilize those funds, but we're just trying to plan ahead because those are those things you can't anticipate when a motor's gonna give up or a turbo goes bad. And it's, when you have a equipment maintenance budgets of I think it was last year it was 11,000 or 17,000. We lost a monitor. The repair was $4,000 for it. So it was like almost a third of our budget for one item. And a new one would cost about 30,000, so that's why we increased those lines. And that's about all I have, unless you have something else to add.
Just the one that you covered the bases, thanks. The one item that I just pointed out as well, maybe, it's not a new item, but in professional services, the ground emergency medical transportation reimbursement, $16,000 for a consultant to help us put together the costs, because it is a very complicated report. But it says here in the note on page 42 that this should be offset by revenue many times over. So when we presented this to you, we estimated $80,000 in revenue. We actually put in this budget document $60,000. So we're trying to be conservative. But that would be the hope, is that for doing this program and for doing it right, we get actually quite a bit more revenue out of it. And I just wanted to point that out.
And actually, within the next 30 days, we should be getting that cost report back that we're doing this year. So it'll give us an idea of what we're going to be able to get on a regular basis going forward with this program. So we'll be able to budget a lot better next year once we get this year's report in.
Do we do that every year? Prepare those cost sheets for reimbursement, or?
This is the first year we've done it. The
Okay.
program's been out for 2 years. The first year, the staff and I were going to do it. And when we got into it's kind of like a 1040 for a business on steroids. And so that's why the companies charge that amount to do it. So,
In theory, in future years, you guys will learn how to do it, and
we
do
will
it
learn how
yourself?
to do it, or it will, once they've done it for our organization once, the cost to have it done may
to
lower as
repeat it may
well.
lower.
And as the program gets more use in the state, there'll be other, matter of fact, last week I got a consultant firm contacted me they're now starting to offer this service. So I think there's going to become, right now there's only like 2 places in the country that do these reports. And now they're going to be more starting to do that with Missouri and several other states are starting this program. There'll be some competition to drive the prices down a little bit.
Any other questions on fire? All right, I'll turn it over to Chief Beamer to talk about police.
Thank you, sir, and good evening, Mayor and Council. Our budget this year has some changes to it from the previous year. The biggest change is in terms of staffing. As Mr. Berlin mentioned earlier, we are increasing our authorization for police officers by 1. That is to address the challenges of hiring. You've already heard about the challenges from the fire department and the fact that we're giving money back every year on the budget line. We are trying to get to a point where we can have enough officers here to perform all the duties that we are committed to do in terms of school resource officer, the community policing unit, the traffic unit, and everything else. So we are going to an overstaffing situation, is a term that's routinely used. After discussions with Mr. Berlin, we're going to increase by 1 officer in the coming year to be prepared for those occasions when we don't have enough police officers here. We are basically hiring a person that will not be committed to any assignment, knowing that historically we lose 3 police officers a year. And so there's always an opening, and we are trying to do what we can to get ahead of the curve so that we have an officer that we have hired, that we're getting into the academy. You've heard me say before that from the time we hire someone, get them into the academy, and under the best circumstances possible, it's 9 months later before they're ready to go. And so by allowing us to have this extra officer, it is the beginning of getting us to the point that when we have 40 police officers authorized for the streets to do different jobs, we're trying to get you 40 officers that are able to do the job. And so that's what this is for. We are also asking for a half person, a part-time position that is non-sworn. This will be a civilian position. And we are identifying this person as a property and evidence technician. In March of next year, Sergeant Stephanie Snook is going to be retiring. And Stephanie has run the property room now for approximately 16 years and has done it very well. Stephanie has also taken on a number of other duties that we have determined one person will not be able to effectively do again because she is a unique individual and is incredibly detail-oriented, is incredibly task-oriented, and what she has been able to do over these past 16 years, we don't think we can do with one person. So what we've identified is the need to reorganize the organization. We are going to take the sergeant's position that she holds and create an administrative sergeant that will take over the responsibilities of maintaining the training records, maintaining the post requirements for the organization, will assist in development of policies with Lexipol, working with the Lexipol model, and a number of other duties. The one piece of her job that we cannot necessarily try to find someone else in the organization to do is the property room. And because of the requirements to work with not only the city prosecutors but the state prosecutors to maintain chain of evidence, to make sure that we are not destroying evidence before a case has been fully adjudicated, and to maintain all the requirements of the property room, we believe that a part-time position focusing solely on that is the best route to go. So that is what we're asking for in this position. It'll be part of a reorganization that comes with her retirement, but we hope to have someone in place and start training them with her prior to her departure. So that's part of this budget. In terms of other significant budget items, our overtime, we are raising that budget from $110,000 to $120,000. Historically, our overtime keeps creeping up. Part of that has had to do with the need to maintain coverage with continual staffing shortages. Part of it has to do with the continually increasing salaries. When salaries go up, overtime costs go up. So we're moving that up by $10,000. We're also increasing by $10,000 our training budget. As part of this reorganization, I mentioned the creation of the administrative sergeant position. Prior to the downsizing of the organization back in 2010, 2011, we had an admin sergeant, and that individual would go to the Missouri Police Chiefs Association Command College in Jefferson City during their tenure in the admin sergeant's role. It's part of our design for succession planning so that we have first-line supervisors that start to get some exposure to the administrative role of the organization and helps us for the time when those that are currently holding command positions leave. We've got other people that have a baseline understanding and functionality in those jobs. The other lines that I want to note on really is the creation of a new line, the camera network maintenance. You'll see that towards the bottom of the page, the right-hand page. With the network, the camera network that we have in our city, it has been very helpful on a number of occasions. But those cameras, there's currently 12 of them out there on the streets, do need maintenance from time to time. And what we've learned is that if we don't start budgeting some money to maintain those cameras, when one goes down, we are scrambling to find the funds to get it fixed. So it just made sense to go ahead and create a line in the budget and set aside $10,000 so that if we do lose a camera for any reason, we don't need to try and find the money someplace else. We know we've got a line dedicated to maintaining those cameras. Tom?
If one of the cameras goes down, like I'm sure it has already, we already have a company in place that we can call, and they're relatively Johnny on the spot.
Yes, sir.
I mean, because we don't want them down for any significant amount of time.
I mean, Stephen Roberts is the one that helps coordinate that. But if a camera goes down, usually I would say within a week, unless there's some significant issue with it, we'll have it up and running within a week again.
Thank you.
And as far as the non-gaming capital items, are we going to hold off on those till next week, Mr. Berlin? Or do we?
Yes, sir, unless you wanted to touch on them, but, yeah, that was my thought.
Okay, we'll get to those next week. So in terms of our general fund items, and are there any questions on any of our lines? Thank you very much.
The next budget is Public Works Administration. It funds 3 people, the Director, Engineering and GIS Technician, and Administrative Assistant. Not a whole lot's changing in that budget, but Pat, did you have any additional comments about?
No, just incremental changes. Unless anybody has any questions.
We need more money for alley repair.
That's
Not in this budget. But we can talk about it. That's a gaming fund.
We are representatives, you know, we represent people and opinions. Hey, we'll talk about it next week.
If we represented them as often as we hear about them.
Yes, that's true. You'd be hearing from us all the time. We're filters.
And we're giving you personal attention early tomorrow morning.
Yes, that's right. We have an 8 o'clock date.
The next budget is Buildings and Grounds. Again, I don't think a whole lot has changed, and it's a very important department, but there is one clarification I'd like to make, which Shirley pointed out to me, and it's in response to a question that was asked early on here tonight regarding the amount that we asked for from Parks and Recreation as for reimbursement to the general fund for expenses provided for the general fund. A big part of the reason that increased so much is because of the position which was funded for the first time last year. And that we also recover for. So that actually Shirley clarified for me is a big part of the reason that, in addition to good record keeping, that amount jumped. Pat, did you have anything you wanted to talk about in Buildings and Grounds?
Downtown maintenance has an extra 4,000 in case the lighting to the arch is a go.
Yes.
And that's about all. We're going to renovate the Christmas lights. A lot of the LED lights are out, and the decorations need renovations. We're going to do that this fall. That's about it.
If there are no other questions, move on to the Community Development Department. Sarah.
We're a small department, so we just have a few items in the general fund. I wanted to call your attention to just a couple of them. Our professional services line item, we're proposing to increase that. We would like to, as we finish up our bicycle master plan, do some additional counting and measurement of bicycles and pedestrians around town. We did some of that this spring to set a baseline of what existing conditions are. So that would allow us to continue that over time. And also, as we start to have more facilities, we will need to occasionally buy a new flex post or to do other minor projects like that. So that's intended to cover those costs. Our software maintenance increase there is really based on existing costs for the InterGov system that we use for permitting and in the field inspection, and based on actual costs that we have. It's kind of out of our control, and the software maintenance that other departments are using also. This is our share, is my understanding. And then minor equipment, we use iPads. All the staff has iPads that they use for field inspections. We stopped using paper forms a couple of years ago, and now those are getting to the point where they just need to be replaced. So those are our major expenses in the general fund. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right. We'll move on to economic development. I'd like to point out a couple of things in this budget. First of all, under professional services, that includes a number of things. It does include the $30,000 payment that we have made to the North Kansas City Business Council, in which you heard about last night from the Business Council, and which will be on your agenda, your next agenda. Also includes cost of frankly, what I'll call development consultants. You know, we have a lot of development projects going on in the city between 1 North, 18th and Swift, Northgate, other possibilities that are coming up, other areas of town that you're aware of that are vacant and might become active. Our folks are really very good, very well qualified. They're not cheap. And so we do budget a significant amount to pay for consulting expenses to assist with development-related consulting, either legal or financial planning that we have. We are also proposing out of this line item this year something new, and that is a business survey. This is something that you all have talked to us about and that we had given some thought to. And of course, we do the citizen survey. For this same amount that's budgeted, we budgeted $20,000 to do a renewed citizen survey this year. Our thought would be that we perhaps also survey businesses. This is something that Kim has done when she was with Blue Springs, has some experience with. And of course, our business sector is really quite large. In fact, in many ways larger than our residential sector. So there might be some benefit in determining if they are happy with the services that the city provides, if they have any thoughts about how we might be able to improve. And we thought that we would go ahead and budget an amount to have that done.
That's a good idea.
Good idea.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea.
Yes, sir.
When we send the business survey out, are we gonna make sure that they're up to date on their taxes and stuff before we give them a survey?
We hadn't thought about that, sir.
No, because I want all the surveys.
I mean, I'd hate to say that they say they hate us and yet they owe us 20 grand.
Right. Well, the resident, I don't know exactly how it would be. I doubt that we would be sending a survey to every single business in any case. Usually you would hire a company and they would do the random survey. It's how they do the residential survey now. We don't really control exactly who gets them. We are doing quite well, I will tell you. I think we have really cut way back on our delinquent business licenses. And in fact, we are planning another work session with you to talk about some issues that we've talked to you about before with business licensing, but we'll take that opportunity to report to you. But really through enforcement, that's becoming less and less of an issue.
Okay.
Yeah.
So on the businesses, it's not just the business council businesses, you'll do a cross-section
That
of
would,
all
yes, ma'am.
businesses,
I don't
so,
think we
okay.
would not just restrict it to business council.
Okay, I would hope
No.
not.
And then we'd also have an item in, which I'll maybe ask Kim to speak to, for business forms and printing. Kim, you want to talk about that?
Sure. This is actually something that when we had our work session back in December, it was brought up. Our business attraction materials are a little old. It's been many years since they've been done before, so we are getting some updated photos during this fiscal year right now, as well as looking at, just like any marketing material, you have to look at what are the buzzwords people are using, what are the images that we're looking. We have become an opportunity zone, so we need to update a lot of our materials that when businesses are perhaps shopping to come to North Kansas City, these are the leave behinds and folders and marketing material that when we meet with potential businesses that are either looking to expand or move into North Kansas City, it's always nice to have on par items to maybe some of the other communities that they're shopping for. So this line item would be really primarily for printing. We do all the design in-house.
Any questions, any further questions about economic development? All right. The last department in the general fund is interdepartmental, which covers items that really apply to all the other different departments. I don't know if there's a whole lot new, really, in this particular department, but if you have any questions about anything, we're happy to try to answer them. All right. Well, with that, we'll move away from the general fund. We've talked about Parks and Recreation. We've talked about library. So I will just briefly touch on gaming, again with the thought that we would address projects next week. Talk a little bit about the revenues in the gaming fund. So the main sources of revenue in the gaming fund are from a 21% tax on gross revenues from gaming at Harrah's. Based on the fiscal year 19 receipts, we're budgeting that to remain the same in fiscal year 2020. We have seen a little bit of a decline in casino admissions, which is a per head tax, so it appears maybe there are a few people going, but they're gambling more. I'm not sure.
Is this people going into the building or onto the floor of the casino?
Onto the floor.
Okay, so if they go to the steakhouse,
No, no, it's
Unless it
actually entering.
encourages them to go.
Right.
Just remember,
Since they're
It's
there.
actually for gaming.
through the turnstile.
Right.
just remember, if
Through
you
the
go,
turnstile,
if you go through the
exactly.
turnstile, go ahead and write that hand
Yeah,
back there a
right,
couple times too.
Got it.
And one item that's a new revenue that's in here, we do have the anticipated agreement with the school district for paying back for the ball field improvement that we're planning. So the first, we had a schedule that was presented to you back in July, and according to that schedule, the first year's payment would be about $59,400. So that's what that revenue is. And then lastly, talked a little bit about transferring $3 million from the water fund to the gaming fund. So that is shown as a revenue into this fund as well. But I won't get into expenditures at this time unless you had questions. We'll address that next week. So we're moving right along. Transportation fund. Again, I've talked a little bit about the issues with KCATA, and tree maintenance, and we'll keep a close eye on that. Pat, did you want to talk about transportation fund expenditures any?
No. There's
Unless you have any
sig-
questions.
significant line items, so if you have a question.
All right. But on streetlight signals repair, it shows an $11,500 decrease, but that's from the amended amount. So we actually are trying to budget a little bit more for that because we do seem to see some additional expenditures in that lately for maintenance of that system. I'll move on to convention and tourism. A few items I'd like to note. First of all, so there are a couple of expenditures for the business council in this budget, and the one we've just talked about under the Economic Development Department for the annual services contract. And in addition, there is money in for the Destination Attractions Initiative, which was a one-time expenditure, was approved by the council last year. The site is still, that initiative is still under development, so the business council did ask if we could carry over the unused portion. That is budgeted at $12,000. And then they have estimated annual maintenance at a monthly cost of $600 to $7,200 for the year. Again, you had some discussion with them about that last night with them, and then an amount for printing new updated maps. So that is an expenditure for the business council coming out of this budget. We would expect the maintenance budget to continue year after year. Snake Saturday, as I mentioned, is funded out of the Convention and Tourism Fund. They have asked for an increase from their budgeted amount of $42,500 to $44,000, and in addition, the recent configuration of Barmer Road has made it likely that we'll need to rent some barricades to hold back the crowd in the area where the island is near City Hall, and where, of course, the review stand and all that is. And Police Department has taken a look at that, and they feel that they have a handle on what they would recommend, and they're meeting with the Snake Saturday Committee here, I think, next week, to talk about that further. But in anticipation that we will need to rent some barricades, which we haven't had before, we have put in an amount in here of $3,000 for that purpose as well. We've talked about the park concert series, and we have agreed, I believe, that you have agreed to fund that again out of this budget for at least another year. You also recently approved the city sponsored tours grant program at $8,000, so that is budgeted in this budget. Do you have any questions about the Convention and Tourism Fund budget? other than that. And other than capital projects, which again, we'll talk about next week.
Why does it say on the mayor's tree lighting minus 2,500?
So Kelly indicated that the expenses for that have not been as high as they had been. It had been $10,000. So she indicated that that would only require $7,500 this year.
Way to go, Mayor. Saving us money.
All right, I'll move on to the Community Center Fund. This is a fund that does, really, to some degree, we take funds from gaming, we put it in, it comes out. This year, we have a transfer of about $300,000 that we're budgeting from gaming, which is less than the amount that's projected in fiscal year 2019 because the bottom line at the Y has been better of late. The expenditures we base upon mainly upon what's in our contract with the Y in terms of the management fee that they receive. It's based upon a couple of factors. One, how low the deficit is, the operating deficit for the facility, and the other is how high revenues are. So based upon that formula, we've computed what we think was an adequate budget of $510,000 for their management fee. We also are assuming that they will manage to break even this year, in which case they get a $75,000 bonus, which is split over 2 fiscal years because they're on a calendar year basis, and our fiscal year is a little bit different. Any questions about the community center budget?
We're putting 100,000 in for equipment, but that's under capital outlay, so that'll be on our agenda next.
Yes, and that's not for anything in particular.
Right.
That's you know, there are often times during the course of the year where they will come to the council, and they always come to the council.
Yeah.
And they'll say, we've got a boiler repair we need to make, and we've taken bids, and this one costs $17,000.
That's not in our contract. It's, is it?
It is in our contract
100,000?
that we will pay for capital expenditures
Up to
over,
100,000 or?
no, there's no cap.
Oh, okay.
But I
We've
think,
kind of talked about doing 100,000 per year.
yeah,
If they
that's a
don't use
budget
it,
number. I mean, if there were a huge repair,
We'd
be on the hook for it. We are, because it's our facility.
So if they decide, or we decide together that we don't want to use those funds for next year, and we take them out of the budget, for example, we could still use funds the next year after. I mean, if we don't have a vision.
So
for
any funds that aren't used out of this 100,000 are returned to the fund balance.
Okay, so you'd recommend just budgeting for it, and then if they
Yes.
use it, they use it. in the
It's a
future, if they don't.
contingency.
Okay.
That's pure and simple. There's no particular capital project that is
It's a
planned out of
placeholder,
that.
basically.
Yes.
Okay.
It's just there as needed if they come to us with individual building repairs that are
Okay.
more than $5,000.
Okay, helpful, thank you.
Communications fund is the fund that we use, again, with a transfer from gaming as necessary to pay for the costs of our Link City network. We do have the agreement that we will share in any deficits. You can see what some of the deficits, our share of some of the deficits have been on page 160. Hasn't been huge. We budget the maximum amount every year to be on the safe side. The maximum amount, according to our agreement with NOC 6, is that our losses are capped at $150,000. To be on the safe side, that's what we budget, but as you can see from past years, it's been less than that. You know, there have been some vandalism issues and other things. In fact, you'll have an item on your next agenda where they're asking for some help, which to pay for the cost of the vandalism that occurred last July. So there may be some additional amounts, but right now that's what we're looking at.
What, this July?
This past July is when that issue on the Heart of America Bridge occurred, where the junction box was.
Okay. I thought you were saying July of 18.
No, July of 2019.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, yeah.
okay.
Exactly.
Water fund. Talked a little bit about the water fund and what the thoughts are there about a transfer to gaming. Pat, did you have anything that you wanted to talk about in terms of water fund expenditures?
No, there's no significant changes. I would say the cost of chemicals goes up about 10% every year. We're at the $335,000 level right now. That's lime and chlorine. That's about all.
So the usage is not up, it's really
No.
the cost per,
It's the cost of transportation more than anything. And then there's sometimes they say a shortage of lime, but we don't really know if that's a real shortage or not.
With the renovations to the water plant that are going to be coming, was one of the benefits anticipated reduced chemical use, or no?
No, actually chlorine use will be, there'll be more chlorine use because we're going to pre-chlorinate
The ammonia?
the raw
Okay.
water.
Okay. All right.
We've discussed some winter water average topics. Has that been considered in the budget for residential?
No, we are planning on bringing that to you. I don't think that the effect will be significant on the budget. We haven't tried to calculate anything. Once we've done it, we'll factor it into next year's budget, but I wouldn't anticipate. So I'm sorry, for anybody who might not be aware of what we're talking about. Councilmember Smith has asked us to look into doing something that a lot of cities do, and that is to calculate sewer usage based upon a winter averaging of what was used for sewer as we calculate according to the amount of water that's been used. So it is assumed during the winter that every bit of water that somebody uses goes down the drain, and it's part of our sewer charge. But in the summertime, some folks, particularly folks who irrigate their yards, use quite a bit of water that does not go down the drain, that goes into the ground. And therefore does not go into our sanitary sewers and does not go to Kansas City to be treated, and therefore it would be appropriate not to charge a sewer charge for that. So we have not had winter averaging here in the city, but Councilmember Smith has asked us to look into it. We are. I do anticipate that we'll be bringing you something for your consideration here. We have talked to our software company, and they can do it, and we're working with them to answer a couple questions and devise a program to bring to you. We would anticipate beginning that this winter, calculating for those who ask for it, winter average use. So if it would work well for people who irrigate. I don't know that there are that many people in the city who do, so we don't think that the impact will be significant.
it's our neighborhood. We have a lot in our neighborhood.
Mostly, yeah, and this is the wrong fund to ask the question, I'm sorry.
Well, that's
Maybe the
okay.
next one.
No, but yeah, right. But that's what,
interesting. I've never heard of that before. How do you account for snow melting? Because wouldn't that be the same as
So
No.
water runoff
it
with your
just-
sewer?
It just checks
Or
the
on your-
amount of water you use during the winter inside your home.
Oh,
and
inside
uses
your
that as-
home.
Yeah,
Oh,
uses that
okay.
as your base.
and then we
Oh, okay.
assume that you use the same amount inside your home in the
In the summer.
summertime as,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
Okay.
your
And that
house
any
is
excess,
charged for
significant excess of that is going to other things, not inside the home. That's the assumption.
Okay. So
It
does
does require us to
inside
do
the
a
home.
calculation, to charge an average, then to make up for it later on as necessary, but it's not, it can be done, and it's just a matter of really getting our software adjusted for it.
Okay, interesting.
So we'll bring you more information on that in the future. Well, now I'm on to that fund, the Water Pollution Control Fund.
Setting you up.
Moving on.
And again, I think, I've talked about some of the issues that you're aware of there. I won't go back into them. Pat, did you have anything that you wanted to talk about in terms of WPC?
Yeah, I do. In professional services, it's going up from 18,000 to 33,000 for two reasons. One, we're going to start a smoke testing program to find out where infiltration is getting into our sanitary system from rainfall mainly. Even though it's been 20 years since we relined all the sewers, we're seeing more and more when it rains, we're pumping more sewage. So that program's going to start. And then another one is we're going to be doing MEGR testing, which is electrical tests of motors at 3 pump stations this year. We were asked by the Levy District, it's a good practice to every 2 years to test all 6. So we're going to do 3 this year and 3 next year, electrical tests of their motors. That's all I have.
One question on the Kansas City, Missouri sewer rates. Do you know when they set their rates annually?
Usually, we get different rates in May, is when we're told of our new rates.
Okay.
I'm not sure about their retail rates.
So did this also anticipate maybe an increase there, or just assuming it's going to be the same?
Yeah, we kind of base it on the previous year's usage and try to make up for it year by year after we've learned of the increase. There are no other questions on WPC. Again, we do include a few funds that I've talked about at the very back of your budget. The retiree health insurance fund, we have one retiree left that we're paying for expenses out of that, so we anticipate that fund will be closed out here in a couple of years, at which point any remaining funds would be transferred back into gaming. The Northgate Capital Project Fund, we talked about, we use that to help to get we take in funds in revenue from our TIF, our tax increment financing. One thing that you don't see in terms of revenue, we mentioned that revenues are from payments in lieu of tax, pilots, and economic activity taxes. In the past, we've gotten economic activity taxes, which are sales taxes in the area, and that was from Ruby Tuesday. Ruby Tuesday is closed. We actually don't anticipate any economic activity taxes next year. Perhaps in the future, but we're not basing it on that. And then we take those funds that are coming into this fund and we transfer them back into the gaming fund, which is the fund that originally paid for the original raising of the original Northgate and for the cost to redevelop it as what we know today. We'll see, as I say, I think a lot of changes in this fund over the course of the year as we learn more about any proposals we may receive to develop the rest of that area. And then the restricted revenues, just some very small funds for the most part that we do receive for things like certain court fees that are reserved for certain uses, and we can only use them for those uses. So we put them in this fund to show you how much we have. And that concludes our discussion of operations, unless you have any additional questions tonight. Be happy. We look forward to talking to you about our capital projects next week.
Somewhere in this budget,
Yes, sir.
Do we have enough money in budgeted that if we had to take out some or all of our Armor Road development, would we have money there to do it with?
No, sir, I haven't budgeted that. If that's something that you wanted to have us reserve money for, then we would want your direction on that.
Well, I think we ought to have it budgeted anyway.
All right, sir. Do you have an amount in mind?
I don't. How much did we spend putting it in there?
Well, I think somewhere about $450,000 it costs to install. Are you proposing that we add an amount?
To take it out.
I'm sorry?
It wouldn't cost as much to take it out.
No, sir. But
I think we need to talk about
I would suggest that you not try to put it in this budget at this time, but if you decide to amend the budget to account for that, we can amend the budget and put in whatever amount that might be. But I have no idea at this time what we might be talking about, so I don't have an amount that I'd have to recommend to you. And we haven't received that direction from the council at this moment, so.
Okay.
I have one other question. I missed it when we were going through. There was a $50,000 website piece. I was just curious, same question I had from the business council last night. Have we put that out to bid for website maintenance, or is that for hosting, or what is that for?
We'll be issuing an RFQ for the city's new website.
Okay.
So we will be putting it out to bid, but we haven't yet. We need to budget for it first.
Right.
Any other questions?
Move to adjourn. Other questions?
Second.
Aye.